First, I want to acknowledge my co-author, Mike Yuille. Once I get done talking about the lake fishery results, he's going to slip in here and talk about a Ontario tributary creel survey that's been going on, began last fall. So there's two lake angler surveys that are conducted. One in Ontario waters has a bit of a different design, but it covers the area outlined in teal. That survey was not conducted in 2014, so most of the data I show you today will be from our New York fishing boat survey, which covers again the main basin of Lake Ontario, New York waters. And this survey has been going on for 30 years now. We cover ports from the Niagara River up to the Association Island Cut near the Eastern Basin. And it is stratified by day type and channel type, and this map just gives you an idea of the distribution of our sample sites. We have super use, high use channels, medium use, and low use channels. And the data can be summarized by region and season. Today what I'll be showing you will be a April to September lake-wide catch rate. First, fishing effort directed at trout and salmon. Whether you look at estimated number of boat trips, which is what you see here, or estimated number of angler hours, the trend is similar, and it's been relatively stable now for well over a decade. The Ontario Lake survey data shows a very similar trend where they've also seen a relatively stable trend in trout and salmon effort. Just to give you an idea, across all 30 years of the survey, on average, 76% of all boat trips on Lake Ontario targeted trout and salmon species. It's increased in recent years, and in 2014, 84% of all fishing boat trips on the lake targeted these species, and 94% of all angler hours spent fishing on the lake were targeting these species. So there are differences in the contribution of the different species to angler catch on the New York side versus the Ontario side. And that's in large part due to differences in distribution of the predator species, timing of when angler surveys start, and also what the anglers are targeting. And if you look in Ontario waters, brown trout's relatively minor versus brown trout, which is the orangish brown portion of the graph. A higher percentage of our anglers are catching brown trout. It's because, in part, in Ontario, their angler survey starts maybe a bit later, might be missing a portion of that brown trout fishery, and their stocking is distributed more, so there may be lower densities of brown trout on the North Shore. Whereas we have a very strong brown trout fishery April well into June most years, although in 2014 our brown trout catch in June was pretty poor. But Chinook and rainbow trout for both sides make up very important components of the fishery. So when you think about our FCOs, our offshore pelagic predators being Chinook salmon, rainbow trout, brown trout, and coho salmon, all of these species have a similar indicator, and that being we want to maintain or increase angler catch rates of these species in the lake and in the tributaries. Today I'm just going to be talking about the lake angler catch rates. And of course we have native species, lake trout and Atlantic salmon. The lake trout FCO indicator, we want to have some level of catch rate, harvest rate for anglers in the lake. And for Atlantic salmon, the indicator is we want to see increasing catches of Atlantic in angler catch. So first to look at catch rates of our offshore pelagic predators. Here you're looking at the charter catch per angler hour of Chinook, coho, rainbow trout, and brown trout. In recent years, we've had now 12 consecutive years of well above average catch rates for Chinook salmon, 2014, our April to September lake-wide value is well above average and similar to what we've seen in recent years. But catch rates for Chinooks, 2014 in particular, really depended on where and when you were fishing. There were periods of poor Chinook salmon fishing. We attribute this to, in part anyway, to the different temperature patterns that we were seeing and wind direction shifts that we were seeing in the lake. For brown trout, catch rate in 2014 was 16% above the long-term average. And for our guys fishing on the western end of the lake, in the springtime, coho, rainbows, some Chinooks, that's what they primarily target in the springtime. This spring, there were periods when those species weren't available, so we had more western guys shifting off targeting browns in the springtime, and they ended up seeing record high brown trout catch rates for them. So we're very fortunate in Lake Ontario to have a diversity of species. So when fishing for one species is not as good, the folks have other species they can shift off onto. For rainbow trout, we've now had 7 consecutive years of near record high catch rates. That would be the red line up there on the graph. And in 2014, there were certainly regional differences. Our guys fishing on the east end saw some of the highest rainbow trout catch rates that they've ever seen. And finally, coho. It's a relatively minor component of the fishery. I actually meant to point that out on the previous graph showing the contribution. For both New York and Ontario for many years now, it's been a relatively minor component of the fishery, and our catch rates have remained lower relative to the other species, but we have had 6 out of the last 9 years were record or near record catch rates for cohos. So overall, all these species have been doing quite well. And what I was able to report last year for the Ontario lake fishery was similar, where last year we were able to say that we were maintaining or increasing catch rates for these species. As far as lake trout go, looking at catch rate and harvest rate, the trends you see here are similar to what Brian will be showing you when he talks about lake trout, the lake trout assessments that we do, where we see a decrease here in the mid-2000s and then an increase in recent years. And with lake trout, in recent years, some of the anglers are connecting with lake trout when they're fishing shallow for browns in the springtime, something that's not really typical. Most of the anglers prefer not to catch lake trout, but they're glad that they're out there as an option if fishing for one species is not as good. They've got something that they can try to target. For Atlantic salmon, the bars are representing estimated catch, and we see that's the secondary y-axis. We see estimated catch of Atlantics across the whole time series is really relatively low. In recent years, we're only talking about 600 Atlantics estimated to have been caught in the New York waters. This compared to our estimated over 200,000 total trout and salmon caught. So Atlantics are a relatively minor component of the fishery, but we do see them. Anglers, when they catch them, they're excited about it. And in recent years, we've seen some record high catch rates. More recently, we're right about the long-term average and similar to rates seen in the early 1900s. So overall, for offshore pelagic predators, are we meeting our indicator for the FCOs? Yes, we're continuing to do that. For our native species, lake trout anglers are continuing to catch them to some extent, and for Atlantics, we're maintaining catch rates. We're not increasing catch rates, but overall, Atlantic salmon catch rates are pretty good compared to some of the other years that we've seen. So now I'm going to kind of shift gears over to Mike Yuille, and he'll talk about the Ontario Tributary Creel Survey.
Okay, thanks Jana. This is going to be pretty high level and quick. It's an ongoing program right now. It started in September last year and is going till the end of May this year. It'll be a very brief summary. I encourage you, hot off the press, our annual report's out on the table. There's more detail there. And then in 2015, when this is finished, there'll be the summary, so the 2014 annual report. So this is a new program to the management unit. It's a comprehensive survey of tributaries across the North Shore. What's been seen through the NIDAC Tributary Angler Survey, the last year was 2012, if I remember correctly. Angler effort in that year for the tributaries was twice the size of the boat fishery. And until this program, we didn't really have a good handle on what was happening in our tributaries in terms of the angler effort. So this is a simultaneous look at 10 tributaries and what's happening through the major spawning runs. So just for a reference, this is what's being covered by New York, and this is what we've added to complement with this program. Specifically, I'm not sure what the P is, but this covers, starting on the west side, we have Bronte, Credit River here, which Mike talked about earlier, Humber River, Rouge, Duffins Creek, Oshawa, Bowmanville, Wilmot, Ganaraska, and Shelter Valley. There's three main parts to this. We're doing angler activity counts. We have staff out walking up and down the tribs to count the people that are out there. Also conducting interviews to see effort, catch, and harvest. And in some locations, we're using car counts as a proxy for the number of people that are out there. For the fish that are harvested, we see Trent up here doing some of the sampling. We're taking lengths and scales, and then we ask other questions. So we're trying to figure out how many people are in the cars so we can get that proxy count, as well as looking at angler profiles. Because this is the first time this is out there, we're trying to get as much information as we can to help develop this program into the future. This is just a quick summary of everything that's been happening out there. I know there's not 36 days in December. We have 2 crews out, so both crews were out for 18 days in December, so combined there's 36 survey days. In total, we had about 3,700 anglers counted and just close to 1,900 interviews conducted. And this is just up until December, and they're still out there right now. A lot going on here, I'll walk you through. This is in the interviews we ask sort of the angler origin, where you come from. And so it's broken down into local, so which is usually within half an hour driving distance. Then outside that is just you're from Ontario. Then Canadian if you're not Ontario or not non-Ontario resident, American or other. Combined, this is 99% of the anglers from September to December, and obviously 1%. And then talking with Jana and Scott Prindle, we threw this together. This is just a comparison. So this is New York State residents on their trib fishery in the same time span. They're about 63% compared to our 99% residents, and then 37 to 1% for non-residents or non-provincial, non-state anglers. For our targeted species, rainbow trout came out as the winner. Most people were targeting rainbows throughout this season, followed by Chinook and brown, despite them looking very similar. Chinook were next, then brown, and last the coho. In terms of angler activity, if you guys remember the distribution of the tribs, Ganaraska River, which was off on the east end over here, was the highest amount of angler activity, followed by Duffins, which was sort of centralized in our geographic range, and then Bronte, which was our westernmost trib. And then lastly, we have catch per unit effort here. The black line is Chinook salmon, rainbow, brown, which is supposed to be brown, I don't know if you can tell that, and then coho here. And as you can see, when the run's petering out, CUE's dropping down. Chinook salmon was the highest CUE, followed by rainbow trout, and then coho and browns. And rainbow and brown stayed pretty stable through the time span. So, in summary, I said it was going to be quick. We're surveying 10 tributaries from September to the end of May. We're waiting for the spring rainbow run. There's going to be a lot of angler activity out there. That's where the bulk of the effort is probably going to come from. Hence, this is a teaser for next year. We're characterizing the spatial and temporal distribution of angler effort, catch, and harvest. It's going to continue until the end of May, as I said before, and 2015 annual report, you guys can read all about it. So, if you have any questions for Jan